So it's Thursday, March 10th, and I'm going to call this Lacey City Council work session to order. We only have a short agenda tonight, just a 2-item agenda. Can I get a motion to approve?
Move to approve the agenda as published.
Second.
Move in second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed?
Aye.
Then the motion carries unanimously. We have agenda. And first up on our agenda is our Joint Animal Services update. I see Sarah has logged on. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Ryder, and thank you for having me, City Council. I appreciate this opportunity to speak with you today and update you about the activities of Joint Animal Services over the last 2 years. And really update you on some progress and accomplishments that we have done through 2021. So just give me a moment while I share my screen and we will get started. All right. And so for those who are new or have not had a presentation from me for a while, Joint Animal Services is Thurston County's primary regional animal shelter and animal control agency. We were established in 1977 by the cities of Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, and unincorporated Thurston County. And that's the 4 jurisdictions that fund animal services. We sit on, and we are in an 800 square feet facility on 5 acres of wooded land in a centrally located site for the pets and people that we serve. And we service a little over 774 square miles of urban and rural terrain. Our vision is to build a safe and humane community for humans and animals. Our mission is to foster an environment of respect, responsibility, and compassion for all animals through learning, legislation, and leadership. And our goals are to ensure and advocate for animal welfare, promote public safety, and support responsible animal ownership. Some of the programs and services that we offer, this is not a totally inclusive list. We provide animal sheltering and humane law enforcement to the jurisdictions, adoption of homeless pets, Roof Over Rover, which is a program where we will give a dog house to an owner in need who does not have shelter for their pet, volunteer and foster opportunities. We provide medical care for sick and injured stray animals, including spay-neuter surgeries prior to adoption, licensing, public education and advocacy. We work as an administrator for a lot of grants for low-cost spay-neuter and veterinary care. 2 examples of the organizations we work with are Thurston County Humane Society and SNAP at providing low-cost vouchers for spay-neuter. And we also, as a public service, provide low-cost owner-requested euthanasia. Some data and statistics for Joint Animal Services. Our current population that we are serving is 280,970, and that encompasses the 4 jurisdictions in our ILA. We do have contracts with the City of Yelm and Joint Base Lewis McChord. Our intake for the last 2 years has been fairly static. We did have a slight increase in 2021 over last year, but they've been pretty static over the last 2 years during the pandemic, which is good. And as you can see, we had a little
custody miscellaneous.
That is an excellent
Apologies.
question. No, that's a great question. Our custody miscellaneous, because we have humane law enforcement, that is going to be animals that we had to remove through a warrant. And so, yeah, you're absolutely welcome. So it was a little bit less last year, which was good as well. Our positive outcomes. consist of 3 different groups. So we have adoption, transfer, and return to owner. Our adoptions, very straightforward. It's how many animals we adopted, both in 2020 and 2021. Our transfers are what we refer to when we actually transfer animals out of our organization to other shelter and rescue organizations, not just in the state, but in bordering states as well. Seattle Humane in the past has been one of our largest transport partners in taking the majority of our, and then they will in turn adopt those animals out through their facility. This really helps as a measure to ensure that we are keeping space at our own shelter so that we can keep taking animals in. Our return to owner is exactly how it sounds. It's when animals are found lost and we are able to reunite them with their owner through the shelter and the reclaim process. So overall, this year we did have a slightly lower live outcome or positive outcomes, and that is the majority of that is due to our lower transfer numbers, and this is pretty standard across the board currently, not just in Washington, but nationally as well. Adoptions have slowed a little bit over the last 2 years during the pandemic, and it has left the larger shelters or destination shelters that can take more animals in, like Seattle Humane, they are not pulling from other shelters as much. So this is our end of year summary. So some overall statistics where you can see over here, we have total numbers, adoptions, return to owners, stray, as we discussed, and some of our other outcomes, which would be shelter euthanasia. And so for us, when we refer to our live release rate or our adjusted live release rate, it is a formula that we use adding in all the animals that come through the door and then how animals exit through our door. And so that gives us our live release rate. And so for 2021, when you include all euthanasias, including owner requested euthanasias, we had a live release rate of 77.5%. Now, when you have our adjusted live release rate that you see here, this is when we exclude those owner requested euthanasias. And you can see that our euthanasia rate, when it's only shelter euthanasias, does go up. What we are finding during the pandemic and the increase in pets in care and services to veterinary clinics, it's extremely difficult to get into a veterinary clinic right now. Let alone when it comes to end-of-life services, people are struggling to either afford euthanasia services or they cannot get into their clinic in a timely manner to say goodbye to their pet because it's the right thing to do at that time. So we are seeing an increase, and the last 2 years we've actually done more owner requested euthanasias than shelter euthanasias. Our field response, as you can see in 2021, did drop significantly in some areas. And there is an explanation for this. It's not that we were going out on less calls. What happened in 2021 is that we changed over to our new shelter management software. And prior to that, we had been operating on a very old system that was no longer supported. And when we moved over to PetPoint, which is our new shelter management system, we were able to actually track our data in a more detailed fashion. And because of this, we were able to track the number of what we call shelter support calls versus field response. So a shelter response call would be something that might be veterinary runs, deliveries, pickups, and other items that would be needed to support the shelter, taking animals to rescue. Prior to that, it could not actually be pulled out of the system. And so now that we have PetPoint, we are actually removing shelter support numbers out of the system. And then in blue here, what you see is our actual field response calls. And over the last 2 years, our actual field response calls have not changed, just how we report them. And so moving forward, you guys will be, the jurisdictions will be seeing actual field call reporting numbers. And so what this means is those are anything having to do with humane law enforcement, barking, neglect, welfare checks, dogs at large, items of those nature are what's going to be reported out in the future. So when you look at that, then there's really only about a difference of 100 calls from last year to this year. Some of our 2021 accomplishments. In 2021, it was a pretty big year for us in making some updates and some changes. We really tried to take advantage of the pandemic in the sense of it was a time for us to slow down and reassess and pivot. And with that came a number of changes. So first, of course, is what I mentioned was our shelter management software. We also realized we needed to update our phone system. We were handling quite significant number of calls. And we did need to update our system to be able to handle that incoming amount. We have also implemented a virtual wait list and queue management system so that people can both make appointments as well as if we have walk-ups, they can sign in and sign up for what they came here today, and they'll get put into a queue. They'll get a text message, and then depending on the wait, they can go get a cup of coffee and wait in their car nice and warm until they get pinged. It's been working really well. We actually rolled it out during our large adoption event that we had in December. So another victory, not just for Joint Animal Services, but for the cities in Thurston County. In 2021, both Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater all adopted a pet store ordinance banning the retail sales of dogs and cats. This humane ordinance prohibits pet stores from selling commercially bred dogs and cats, and instead allows for the adoption of pets sourced from shelters or rescue groups. This is an ordinance that protects constituents from predatory lending practices that pet stores use, and from inadvertently supporting the puppy mill industry. Our volunteer programs. So COVID-19 gave us the opportunity to assess and revamp our programs. We had very limited volunteer opportunities while we were moving through the pandemic, but that was great. It gave us a chance to reassess our program. We now have new volunteer software. We have moved all of our onboarding for fosters and volunteers into an online format. So you can do your application and full onboard and training in the comfort of your own home prior to even walking in our doors. And over the last 2 years, we have seen an increase of 30% in the number of foster homes and a 7% increase of animals going into foster care. We are also in the process of creating a medical area and surgery suite. Again, even prior to the pandemic, a huge bottleneck for us in the shelter in moving animals through the system as quickly as possible was the medical portion, getting their spay neuters, x-rays, dentals, anything that would be needed to hopefully make them healthy and adoptable, or at least as healthy as that animal can be, was really becoming a barrier to moving animals out quickly. And the pandemic really emphasized that even more. And so we now have a 12 by 42 modular building, and it encompasses a surgical suite treatment area, and we'll also have some stainless steel cages to hold the animals. So this is going to allow us to provide spay and neuter surgeries on site, as well as swift medical exams and treatments for animals with potential medical issues. Some of the more extensive issues, things like x-rays, will have to be still sourced to the veterinary community. And this move is by no means a reflection of the veterinary community. They are wonderful partners that do so much for us, but even they are overwhelmed with the number of clients and appointments, and they have all spoken how much that they support this, because the appointments that we're taking with our shelter animals can then be opened up to the community and their pets. We've also received grant funding from the ASPCA through the Northern Tier Shelter Initiative for a little over $39,000 to help us purchase all the equipment for the surgery suite. Another success that we had was in December, we participated in the Empty the Shelter event sponsored by the Bissell Pet Foundation. This was our first large-scale event, and it went extremely well. We were able to find loving homes for 85 pets, and that included 65 cats, 19 dogs, and 1 iguana. But it was more than us doing the adoptions. To be completely honest, it was how much the community came together that day, that whole week, to support us doing this event. It opened up much needed space at our shelter, and we were able to find those 85 pets were home for Christmas, which was really great. One of the other things that we launched in 2021 was our online licensing portal. And so I'm going to take a couple of minutes to walk you through so you can see how easy and user-friendly that it can be. And so you just hop onto our website, scroll down. Currently this year, most people are creating a new customer account. If they have licensed with us before, we can assist them getting their account up and running. And so in this demonstration, I was the new user. So you guys will be seeing how this works when we enter everything in. So first you create your new account and enter in all your customer information. Once you have done that, you can work on entering in your animals, 1 animal at a time. And once those animals are entered into the system, you can see here, I used my cat Rufus as the example. So Rufus was entered into the system, and then once he's there, I can scroll down and I have 4 available licenses that I can pick from depending on where I reside. So currently I do reside in the county. So Rufus's license would be $8. I would add it to the cart and then continue to check out. After that though, I don't have any more slides because it would be entering in credit card information after that. But it's very simple. Once constituents are in the system, then they just get an email reminding them of their renewal date, or they will get a letter in the mail, and then they can hop online, use their person or license number to get back in and just renew after that. It's just the initial first steps this year of getting everybody into the system that is taking a little bit longer, but come about May, when we launched this system, people will start getting renewal notices this year. And the last thing I wanted to talk with all of you about today was our 5-year strategic plan that was developed in 2021 by the Joint Animal Services Commission and staff of Joint Animal Services. And I won't go into all the key benchmarks, but I did want to discuss our 3 goals that we will be working on over the next 5 years. Goal 1, to become a sustainable organization with the capacity to meet the needs of our community. And this will include conducting a number of studies, including a feasibility study to assess the current building's capacity and our ability to provide the best care for the animals of Thurston County. We will look at conducting a governance study to assess the IGA and current governance structure. We're going to look at and assess funding sources, revenue, and the community's capacity for giving, and perform a marketing and brand analysis and implementing those recommendations. This is all moving us forward. These are we're collecting data so that we can begin the discussion of what either renovating this shelter or building a new shelter looks like. We moved in here in 1996. The building is old. It was never set up for a shelter and handling the capacity of animals and people that come through the door. And so one of the things we need to look at is how much longer our building can last. Can we renovate this? Or will it be less expensive to build a new shelter? And so that's what these studies are all in relation to, and also looking at the support for what a new shelter would look like. Goal 2 is to expand and improve animal care and programming to support our community's pets and people. Our community's needs, as well as the shelter's needs, are ever changing. And so we want to make sure that we're providing the best care to both constituents and animals. So some of the strategies are going to be to continue to implement and increase medical care for shelter animals, review, identify, and recommend changes to local ordinances that impede or limit life-saving programs and services within Thurston County, and create training and development opportunities for staff, focusing on our vulnerable populations, both within the shelter and the community. And we're also going to be evaluating our current and future staffing needs. Goal 3, we would like to increase our accessibility, inclusivity, and enhance community involvement. So some of the strategies around this include developing more collaborations by leveraging our reputation and working with Thurston County entities, stakeholders, nonprofit organizations, and businesses. We will evaluate our language and DEI access of all materials, brochures, handouts, our website, forms, anything online. And we would like to partner more with Thurston County entities to promote joint animal services through the marketing and communications teams. With that, I'm going to stop sharing so I can open it up for questions.
Any questions? That was a lot of good information.
What's your website? What is the website domain name?
Absolutely. It is jointanimalservices.org.
Councilmember Cox. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Are you seeing any tapering off of demand for animals now that we seem to be emerging somewhat from the COVID pandemic?
So 2021, although we did have more adoption numbers, that was at the very end of the year because of the adoption event. But we had definitely seen a decrease in adoptions from that first year when everybody was really exuberant about getting a pet. But the good news is we have not seen an increase. There's been a lot of I don't want to say myths, but a lot of misinformation that has been generated that now that people are having to go back to work, everybody's surrendering their pet. And that's just not the case. There are surrenders happening, but it's not because people are going back to work. What's happening is because they're being evicted. They're having to choose between feeding their family and feeding their pet. And so those are the types of issues that we are seeing. And the other one I would say would be from a behavior standpoint. One of the downsides of adopting pets during COVID is the inability to socialize them. So you had a lot of animals and puppies that were being adopted, especially, that were not able to be socialized with people because everybody was isolating during the pandemic. They couldn't be out meeting new animals, meeting new people, having those interactions in their formative years. And so we are seeing dogs coming into the shelter with some increased behavior issues because of that lack of exposure to a variety of elements in their youth that now create very wary dogs who are unsure of the world that they are going into now that things have opened up.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate the update, and thank you for the job you're doing, and we wish you the best.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a wonderful evening.
Yeah, thank you. So next up on our agenda is the council travel, and I take it everyone received the email from Scott Spence earlier today, but Shannon, is there anything else you want to add to this discussion? I know I'm throwing it on you when you haven't been through this round. I guess I'll let me update the council. So every year at this meeting, the first meeting of March, it's within our ordinance that talks about council travel, that by this meeting, every council member should take a look at what travel obligations they're going to look at for the year. It's almost a little late, to tell you the truth, because the first travel opportunity of the year is at the National League of Cities Conference, which I'm flying out to tomorrow. So you have had to have discussed this and planned it a little bit ahead of now. But this is the first conference that's actually been open since COVID. So there hasn't been any travel opportunities at all in the last 2 years. But with this conference and also with National League of Cities Conference, everyone could have had the opportunity to travel with me tomorrow to Washington, D.C., to the National League of Cities. That's called the conference, Congressional Conference for the National League of Cities. And so National League of Cities has 2 major conferences, one starting this next weekend, another one in the fall. And the Association of Washington Cities has a couple events, but their main event is in June, where it's usually, either it goes from Eastern Washington to Western Washington, and you have the ability to go to that conference and have continued education for council members. And so historically, we've had a couple of council members who've been very active between the Association of Washington Cities and the National League of Cities. It's usually, for the most part, it's been Cynthia Pratt, former deputy mayor, was very involved in the National League of Cities and as in the Association of Washington Cities. And so she got really involved in the EE&R committee at the National League of Cities and was the vice chair and the chair of that committee at the national level. So very, very important positions it was the energy, it was eventually the environmental group at the National League of Cities. And so she was very involved in that. I helped start the Military Communities Council at the National League of Cities and was the vice chair and chair of that, and also been very involved in the real council at the National League of Cities, which was the Race, Equity, and Leadership Council. But there's other opportunities to get involved in the National League of Cities. And I know Councilmember Stedman has gone to some NLC events, and so has Councilmember Greenstein. And so this is the time to sort of take a look at what travel you may be interested in. Each council member, as is pointed out from Scott, has a travel budget about $3,000, which does a pretty good job of getting you to a couple different conferences depending on the conference. And so you can kind of take a look at what you want to do. I would really recommend, especially for the new council members, to either go to the Association of Washington Cities conference and you have an opportunity to sign up for some classes and do some continuing education there, or sign up with the National League of Cities conference in the fall, which this year it's going to be in Kansas City in November. And there's a whole host of things you can do at that conference, and I'd be more than happy to help you out and take a look at how you can get involved in either the Association of Washington Cities or the National League of Cities. And so, but I would really encourage our newer council members, if you haven't ever, well, obviously you haven't had the opportunity to do it, this will be your first opportunity this year, is to take a look at that conference. I'd be happy to talk to you offline and let you know how you can get more involved. It's a big loss to lose Cynthia, because she was such a presence at the National League of Cities. Like, everyone knew who she was. She took a huge leadership role. You couldn't go to a conference and bring up her name without someone at the conference not knowing who she was. And so it'd be nice to have someone else going to these conferences with me while I'm still going. So that's my 2 cents. Shannon, you want to add anything?
Mayor Ryder, the only thing that I would add, I thought you did a fantastic overview of the travel and training allocations. Did Scott communicate a deadline to send in those good faith estimates of travel and training for the year?
So we usually, it's a little bit different. Usually what we do is since we haven't had travel in the past, we haven't had opportunity to go through this process. But what we would normally do is have this sort of, each council member would kind of take a look at what's available. And it would be this meeting where we would sort of discuss it and sort of let staff know, okay, I think I'm going to go to this conference. I think I want to go to this conference. And we'd start mapping it out and getting things in place to do that. Since we are just now allowing travel to come back, what I would suggest is that whoever is interested in travel, all the new council members who are interested, if you're interested in travel, let's set up a time where you can talk with me and we can talk about those opportunities and let's get something planned. And I'd say we have a little bit of time because the next opportunity to do anything is in June with Association of Washington Cities at their main conference. And so what I would say is, by the end of April, let's make sure we know what the travel is for the rest of the year. And then once we get back on a regular basis, you will kind of gone through this year and look at the opportunities of what you could do. And then by this meeting next year, we will then everyone will know kind of what they're going to do for the following year. And we can, discuss it then and say, I want to go to this conference and I want to go to this conference. And then we'll be done with it by this time next year. But I'll give everyone a little bit of grace period. Like I said, if anyone has any questions, get a hold of me, and we'll talk it through if you're interested in doing some travel. Does that sound good?
Where is AWC this year?
I think I wish Cynthia was our representative or was on the board of directors.
No worries, I can look it up.
So yeah, I'm not sure. I think
it is Vancouver.
Vancouver,
and it's going to be June 21st through the 24th.
June 21st, 24th. Councilmember Cox.
Do we have a centralized list of the conferences and when and where they are? And if so, is it possible to send them out to everybody?
That's a good question, Shannon. I know we can get that list together and send it out to the council.
Yeah, Councilmember Cox, we currently do not, but we can certainly put together some information on some of the major ones that Mayor Ryder just talked about, like AWC's conferences and NLC's conferences and some other additional governmental conferences that are going on.
And so if you get involved in National League of Cities and you get to a point where you get onto a committee, there's another conference that's available there, the Summer Leadership Conference that's available as well if you've been selected to a committee. And so I've been on a committee for the past, 8 years or something like that. And so I've always been able to go to that other conference, which is in the summer. It happens to be at the exact same time, where right around the same time as the Association of Washington Cities conferences. And so I've been stuck where I couldn't, it's been very difficult to make it to both of those. Deputy Mayor is a troop, Cynthia was a trooper and she would actually fly from one meeting to the next, but that was a little too much for me. I wouldn't do that, but that's the problem with that summer policy meeting with the National League of Cities. Other than that, that's down the road. If you go to something in November and you get selected to committee the following year, there's another meeting you could possibly go to during the summer. Councilmember Vasquez.
I mean, if this is the right moment to mention this, I am interested in attending the AWC annual conference that happens in June. I've been to some of their offerings before. I used to go to the LRI Labor Relations Institute that they have over in Yakima, and it was really excellent content.
Yes, great. We will put you down for that Vancouver conference. Is anyone else interested in going to the Vancouver conference? Don't know.
I'm interested in the NLC Summit in November.
Okay. Michael's will go to the NLC Summit. That's in November. It's in Kansas City. Deputy Mayor? Uh-oh. So did AWC or NLC or both? NLC? Okay, so NLC for in November, Deputy Mayor. What about anyone else?
Possibly.
Okay, which for possibly for NLC in the winter or in the fall?
Yeah, possibly.
Okay, and Councilmember Cox?
If I can make it work with dates, I might go to the state AWC one in June.
Perfect. Councilmember Kunkel, are you interested in either the Vancouver or?
Not this year.
Okay, no problem.
Not this year. I've got too much going on. I wouldn't be able to take the time to do it.
Yeah, understandable. Okay,
Yeah.
well, I think you got a list, Shannon, a preliminary list of possibilities. We will follow up with everyone. If Robin or well, Malcolm already said he wants to look at interested in NLC in the fall. Robin, if you're interested in going to NLC in the fall, let's have a conversation offline and we can talk a little bit more about that.
Sure.
Mike, I can't hear you. What'd you say?
You were, am I coming through or am I breaking up?
You're breaking up, but go ahead, try.
All right. Hey, the NLC, you were on the Veterans Committee, the military affairs one. And I'm pretty sure that has a big impact on the VA hub or our Veterans hub. So that's something to think about, especially Ed being a, prior service military and Malcolm's family is and such.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, the Military Communities Council, I helped start the Military Communities Council at the National League of Cities. It got started as a peer networking group. The very first conference I ever went to was right that first year I got elected. I went that fall, and I happened upon a military communities peer networking group. And at that peer networking group, I found that there was a accord that was signed between a military installation and a local community. And I brought that information back and gave it to, at the time, Greg Kuya was our city manager. And we pushed out that information. And that was really one of the early startings of how the South Sound Military Community Partnership got started. Is we took that MOU that I requested between the military installation in the city, and we sort of copied it and started the South Sound Military Communities Partnership. And so I kept going to those meetings, and then at some point I requested, it's like, hey, there's so much going on with veterans. This should be more of a full council with staff. And I was able to convince NLC to start that, and we had our own staff, and we became a full council instead of just a peer networking group. And through that council, bouncing off ideas is sort of gave us some of an idea of how to start the Lacey Veteran Services Hub through talking to others. So there, you can see how talking to other communities and the issues that they're dealing with and bouncing off ideas from other peers can lead to really good ideas. And so it's a little bit of background on why I've been so involved in National League of Cities. Like I said, I think it's a good opportunity to grow as an elected official. You really don't have that many opportunities to learn from other people and actually take classes and so on and so forth. Set these conferences a couple times a year. So, with that, does anyone else have any questions? Okay, then it looks like that we're at the end of our agenda. We've making notes on who's maybe interested in what, and we'll follow up with you next month or so. And with that, I will call this meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone.